Hi, welcome to the Deep Thought. Today, I want to talk about language. I want to talk about linguistics, and I want to talk about the impact that they have on us on the individual level. So I'm just going to jump right into it, going straight into the origin of our sophisticated language, because anybody can go far and far, far back and try and associate language to evolutionary things. But I want to talk about the origination of the sophisticated language that we've probably been using for the past maybe few thousand years, up to maybe 10, 20,000 years as human beings. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think it'll give us a little more insight as to how we communicate and how we can really start thinking about information that we receive from other people and really start understanding better what people mean with what they say. And I think this is very important to know because it'll just help everybody in the long run in many different ways. So let's start off by obviously stating that our language comes from symbols. As human beings, we've actually learned to associate everything with symbols, images, pictures, however you want to paint it. But everything essentially comes in the form of a symbol. They represent something. These images that we concoct with the language that we use, the letters that we associate to form certain structures that paint a certain picture, are all a part of this sophisticated language that we use. And going back, obviously, where it really started was probably in the ancient art symbols. And to this, I'm just going to go to the best of my knowledge, the Egyptian hieroglyphs that we've uncovered in Egypt from the last known civilization that we've really that we can't even decipher. Because I think before then there's the Babylonians, and we don't actually know anything about their cultures or their language either, but or their languaging. But in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, for example, they have many different types of symbols for many various things. So they have one specifically for a bird. There's a hieroglyph, and if you don't know anything about Egyptian hieroglyphs, they have something that looks somewhat like an owl, kind of standing at the side, looking towards the person that is writing, or in this case, drawing out the bird. Now, the bird in the Egyptian culture most likely had many various meanings. It didn't just represent a bird as we would on the surface assume that it would. There's many different things it could actually represent. It could represent the sky. It could represent various forms of weather patterns associated with different symbols, etc. It very well also could have represented the god of the sky, which is known as Ra in Egyptian culture. It very well could have been a different type of association for that as well. And this is very important to understand because these symbols are still used today in our culture. In our modern culture, we still use symbols to actually represent everything coming from pictures of objects that we see within our homes to natural things outside, such as, the trees out there, the grass, different types of animals, etc. Now, we can see here that in very ancient cultures, we used symbols to represent things. It was probably a short time after we realized that we can communicate through symbols, that we learned that we can actually communicate through sound to actually associate these symbols with certain things instead of having to draw them out. We can just make a sound, and it would actually, that sound culturally would then be recognized or understood as that specific thing. So like here, we can say, I can say the word bird, and we immediately get an image of a bird flying in the sky. Whether it's an eagle, a hawk, a pigeon, a raven, a crow, it doesn't matter. But you still nonetheless understand that when I say the word bird, instead of drawing one out for you, you get the idea of something that is flying out in the sky. And this is the sound that predates the modern alphabet. Most likely was the sound was probably made and developed after the alphabet itself. Because of course, when you create any type of linguistic alphabet, you have to start assigning sounds to certain characters. I don't want to say letters because that's too specific. Letters are, well, letters, but you can make anything a specific character. The plus sign is a character. The exclamation point is a character. The pound sign, or in modern days where most people don't even know what a pound sign is or recognize it, the hashtag symbol. But all these sounds basically originated after we began to develop our own alphabets. And with these sounds, we began to define, of course, pictures. So the word bird no longer was actually a representation or a drawing of the word of the bird itself, and instead it represented a broad generalization. So like I said, when I mention the word bird, you probably get an image of many of the various birds that I mentioned earlier. And this is very important to really understand, because with these sounds, with the fact that we can make sounds and these sounds symbolize something, the combination is damn near infinite. And the reason I say that is because we can look around our world right now and we can see that there are, I believe, over 5,000 different languages in the world. And they all utilize different types of symbols and sounds in association to other things, to the outside world. And of course, with all this comes meaning. So when we see the symbols and then we associate them to certain sounds that are then associated to alphabet, letters, characters, we can paint clearer pictures of whatever it is that we're trying to actually of what it is that we're trying to say, or what's a better communicate. This is also very important because when we start utilizing symbols in this way, or language in this way, we learn how to, we understand that we start painting pictures in the minds of the psyche, of the human psyche, of our minds. So most of the time, we look or we hear words, and we don't realize that we're actually imagining them inside of our heads too, at the same time when we hear them. And this is very important to really think about. So with this, with the origin of language, we can now move on into the importance of understanding these things, of understanding how language works, and why it is really important to actually understand this. One is communication. And I think that's the number one reason why we need to start understanding communication a lot better, start learning about linguistics and language in detail, because there's a lot of miscommunication that goes on between individuals. People don't know how to express themselves very well, but communication, learning to develop this this ability is what allows us to manifest complicated thoughts and ideas to one another and to everybody else around us. So, first and foremost, communication. Very, very important. It's the first thing that I would suggest to really take into mind when you start learning about language, linguistics, and how to actually communicate with other people. Now, another thing is when we utilize symbols, the origin of sophisticated language, the symbols that we utilize and we develop begin to evoke more ideas, more complicated ideas. And this comes to, again, say that the more symbols you actually understand, the more language you understand. This is why it's very important to understand, or at least try to learn, a secondary language. Because the more symbols that you have in your arsenal, the more ideas that you're capable of forming when you hear different various things of different cultures and faiths, especially, because you have more of an idea of what they're trying to say, or the idea that they're trying to communicate to you personally, and then you can communicate to them. A good example of this is actually, to me personally, there was a moment where I realized that there was a very close resemblance of two words from two very vast and different cultures. So one actually comes from where I was, from my culture, which I'm from Yugoslavia. I'm Bosnian. My family comes from Bosnia, and the word is Bud, which is actually a short word of Buddha, which comes from the Buddhist texts. And what's really interesting about this is, obviously, when we hear the word Buddha, we understand that it represents a form of enlightenment, awakening, and that's the important thing right there. Is in my language, Bud means to wake up. Buddha or Buddhan means awoken. And it's just very fascinating that these words that came from two different cultures, vast distances apart, represent very closely the same idea. Because Bud or Buddha, Buddhan, means awakening, awoken. Buddha obviously means enlightened, the enlightened one. And these are all very important things to really think about. That was just a short little story on on how funny it is when you find these little things that are that resemble one another from different cultures. But nonetheless, these are all very important things for us to really consider and think about in our lives, because language brings meaning to our life. Language brings definition to our world. It's how we explain things that happen outside of ourselves. And it's probably one of the best things that we can ever invest our time into really learning and discovering, because it'll help us really recognize and understand the world outside of ourselves that much better. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.